I'm talking about is getting a relationship with your breath.
Okay.
Meaning that for you to do that, it's very easy to do. It's very easy not to do. And
Yes.
I ask like people that I work with all the time, I want you to practice 3 to 5, maybe 7 times a day where you're just dropping into your breath, meaning you're pushing out everything like for 3 seconds, for 4 seconds, maybe 5 at most, and then let it go. Just drop into your breath. Give me 2 or 3 breaths, and then let go. Because in that moment, you got into the here and now. You got into the present.
The present.
And if you can do that, right? If you can do that, that's a lot of control. And the reason why it's beautiful to have a relationship with your breath is because what I deal with and what I teach is that every day we're surrounded by an emotional hurricane, and that emotional hurricane can be inside of us or outside of us. So what happens in the middle of a hurricane, the eye of the hurricane? It's calm. How do we get calm? We got to get into our breath. So no matter how chaotic a situation is, or how stressful something is, get into your breath. Because if you have your breath, you have your mind and you have your body real quick. That's how fast it works. But we have to get into our breath and have a relationship with it.
Hey everyone, Pastor Tom here, and this is the 24Today Inspiring Stories podcast, and it is my pleasure today to have Grant Parr with me. Grant is a mental performance sports coach. That's a lot in one title, Grant. And listeners, don't let that scare you. The whole idea of mental or sport. You might not be a sports fan. That's okay, because this is really going to apply to you. Because he has written a book called The Next One Up Mindset, and the subtitle of that is How to Prepare for the Unknown. So that's the part that applies to all of us, whether you're into sports or not. We all have these times, sometimes times that we are hoping for that launches us into the unknown, and then also times that, like Grant and I both have experienced, where life just kind of hits you hard and you're hurting and you're broken and you're into an unknown area in that way also. So this is really going to apply to you. Grant, again, is the author of the book, The Next One Up Mindset. He owns a company called Game Face Performance. He has worked with Olympians, professionals, collegiate students, high school students. He has a podcast called 90% Mental. And the title of this episode is Just Breathe. Now, Grant, I frequently encourage people to breathe and just focus on this 24-hour period, which has a lot to do with the whole idea of the 24Today podcast, 24.org, my blog. Not living in yesterday or tomorrow, and I know that that's a lot of what you teach. So I'm excited to talk to you about this subject of breathing. Grant Parr, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to talk about this topic and share a little bit about my background and my book and just kind of how I work with people.
Awesome. Hey, tell us a little bit, just as we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. I kind of mentioned what you do for a living, but tell us more about what you do for a living.
Yeah, I'm a mental performance coach. So I work with athletes, teams, coaches, also executives and corporations on mental skills training. So basically what I'm doing, I'm either addressing or enhancing someone's ability within the mental game. So I don't believe anybody needs to be fixed. I don't believe anybody's broken, really. I think that if we can just use different words and different intentions of addressing. So if someone feels like they're broken or they need to be fit, I just address it. And if we need to take something that's really, really good, like if something's really good right now, let's make it better. Let's enhance it.
Sure.
So yeah, that's kind of my goal, and just sharing my energy is huge. That's my offering. So within my practice, I'm really about doing a lot of energy work as well.
Great. Tell me a little bit about your family, Grant.
Beautiful family. We're tight. My father's no longer with us, but grew up with a very, very touchy, lovey, feeling family where parents had a hand on us, always had their hands around our head when they really wanted to talk to us. Very kissing and loving. I mean, I was kissing my dad on his lips all the way up until I was high school,
Wow.
senior in high school, just before
Wow.
going to school. We were just just everything was about love. And then
Mm.
my older brother Trent and my older sister Joelle, we're all tight and very close to our mom as well.
All right. So speaking about your dad and the closeness um, that you always felt to him, you describe him as the best coach that you ever had, and actually, he was the one who taught you how to breathe. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you think of words like, and you hear it all the time, people say, "Hey, just breathe,
Yeah.
uh, focus,"
Yeah.
right? So my dad taught me at a young age kind of what that meant. And so when you say like focus, focus on what? Focus on the opponent, focus on your breath, focus on your technique, focus on what? So he would really, when he talked to us and he'd say breathe, he would literally, like, he wouldn't talk to us until we got into our breath. Because there's a lot of times where he used that word, like, hey, just breathe. It's because we were very emotional and we were young. My brother and I, my sister, when I was playing baseball, this is where he started working on mental skills with my brother and I. It was when I started playing baseball and at 7. So when I was around 10 or 11, that's when I started to really understand that breath was was important. But it wasn't until later in life till I realized that breath actually saved me and saved me in some crazy situations because I was in my breath.
Are you literally talking about physically breathing, or is it more than that in what you're describing?
Yeah, it's conscious breathing. Like, because right now you and I are breathing. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
involuntary,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm talking about is getting in a relationship with your breath,
Okay.
meaning that for you to do that, it's very easy to do. It's very easy not to do. And I
Yes.
ask like people that I work with all the time, I want you to practice 3 to 5, maybe 7 times a day, where you're just dropping into your breath, meaning you're pushing out everything, like for 3 seconds, for 4 seconds, maybe 5 at most, and then let it go. Just drop into your breath.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 2 or 3 breaths,
Mm-hmm.
and then let go. Because in that moment, you got into the here and now. You got into the present.
The present.
And
Yeah.
and if you can do that, right? If you can do that, that's a lot of control. And the reason why it's beautiful to have a relationship with your breath is because what I deal with and what I teach is that every day we're surrounded by an emotional hurricane, and that
Yeah.
emotional hurricane can be inside of us or outside of us. So what happens in the middle of a hurricane, the eye of the hurricane? It's calm. How do we get calm? We got to get into our breath. So no matter how chaotic a situation is, or how stressful something is, get into your breath. Because if you have your breath, you have your mind and you have your body real quick. That's how fast it works. But we have
Yeah.
to get into
It
our
really
breath and have a
does.
relationship with it.
Yeah. And as a pastor, I teach that along with just the thought of not only breathing, but just take a few moments spiritually just to regroup, say a prayer. Um, so you're, not only the physical, but, but spiritual as well. So I really identify that with that. Grant, there was a time that you forgot to breathe, and it was in a football game. You're a huge sports person, athlete, and there was a time in high school that you forgot to breathe. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, actually, it was in college. It was my first
Oh, that
college game.
you're right. Yeah, of course, you're right. But that was in college. Yeah,
Yeah, no
I'm
problem,
right
no
that you're
problem.
right.
Yeah, it was an interesting night because it was the first time in my entire life that I went into a season not being a starting quarterback. And I was playing for a team that literally just the year before played in a national championship game and lost, but they were a very, very good team. So first time not being the man, and I got brought in at halftime. We were playing against a team that was number 3 in the state, and we were losing 14-0. So they brought me in, and the coach was like, "Grant, you're gonna play, but we're gonna put a short leash on you." So that doesn't seem really positive, or
Right.
So anywho, I went in and I just had fun and I trusted myself. I played a little scared because everything seemed fast and big, but I just
Mm-hmm.
trusted myself and I
Mm-hmm.
went off. Like, I was like, we were beating them 21-14 in the middle of the fourth quarter. So to to actually share that moment, it was, I don't know, 2.5 minutes left. We were up by a touchdown. It was 3rd and 8. All we had to do was just get a first down, and then we
Mm-hmm.
just run out the clock. It's
Sure.
all right.
Right.
And what had happened was uh, the coach, as he gave me a call, gave me a play, I started going back to the huddle, and then he calls me back to the sideline and gives me a different one.
Right.
And so as
Meanwhile,
I'm
the
going,
clock's running, right? The
yeah, there's 30 seconds, right? You only
Yeah,
have
yeah,
30
all right.
seconds to call. So
Right.
so then I'm running back to my huddle. I get to the huddle and realize that the call that he made, the formation, requires to have two tight ends. So we only had one tight end in the huddle.
Right.
So then I'm going screaming back to the sideline, going, "We need Eric Brown. He was the tight end. He's on the other side of the sideline, sitting on the bench with his helmet off." So he ends up finally gets his helmet, starts to realize he needs to be in the game. So he starts running. Coach pulls me back to the sideline and throws me another play,
Oh my
switches
goodness.
it in this
There
within the
can't be
same
much
formation.
time left before
There's
you have to
not.
snap the ball.
There was literally probably about 11 to 12 seconds left,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
was sprinting.
Yeah.
So when I got into the huddle, right? So there was a moment in that time, even though there wasn't a lot of time, I could have dropped into my breath. It only takes a second or two
Wow.
just to get me grounded, and I didn't
Yeah.
do that. So I ran into the huddle. I looked at everyone, and that's what I just did. I just looked, and everyone was like, "What's the play?" I'm like, and they're like, everyone started screaming, "What's the play?" And I'm all, and I saw the play. It was 32 power. I couldn't get it out of my mouth. So I'm like, the two play. And one of my guards is like, "What's the two play?" And I'm like, the two play. And then the other, my tackle goes, 32 power. And I'm all, yeah, 32 power. So you can only imagine this freshman
Sure.
who's like freaking out, but having a good game. I go up to the line of scrimmage and I'm rushing, right? And I don't check my backs. They're in the wrong formation. So
Everything's going wrong.
when I went to go hand off the ball, no one was there. So I got sacked for a loss of 15. We ended up punting the ball. And the first play of that series, they ended up throwing a 51-yard touchdown, tied it up, and went for two, and ended up beating us.
Wow.
All because I lost my breath.
Yeah. And then the coach wasn't very nice after that game.
No, he, which was, it was an unfortunate thing, but he apparently didn't have trust in me anyways. That's why he didn't start me, right? And so, but I showed a lot of promise. And after the game, I thought he was going to actually console me. Like, "Hey, you did a good job as a freshman against,
Right.
But no, he literally put his arm around me, swung me against the wall, and just started kind of punching me under my armpits. And I was sitting there going, "Whoa." And then after that, I walked into the locker room and I had guys going, "Dude, you're our quarterback." And I'm like, "Well, the offensive coordinator doesn't think that. The coach doesn't think
Sure.
that." So
Well, eventually you went on and you had a lot of success, and you developed what you call a warrior mentality. Only then to eventually lose that. Can you tell me what you mean by that warrior mentality, and then how you eventually lost something that was so great for you?
yeah, I think the warrior mentality, for me, to have a warrior mentality, you have to know who you are outside of sport. So when you think about football, it's what you do, it's not who you are. So when I realized at the college level, I knew who I was. I had a good sense of my identity. I knew how to let that go for practice and for games because I completely immersed myself into the game. I immersed myself into the role of a football player. And so when you can do that, it's a beautiful transition because you're letting go who you are to be something else, to play this violent, beautiful game. But then you have to go back to who you are. So when you are actually losing or winning, it's a nice way to actually separate your identity as an athlete and going back to the person who you are. So I did that a lot. I had a strong identity as a person, as an athlete. But when I had a career-ending injury to my hip, that was when I had one more year left, and I was upset that I was being pushed out of the game because of my hip, and I couldn't play anymore. So that was where I lost it. I made a choice to go, I'm frustrated. I like being a quarterback. I don't even want to talk about being a quarterback. And it was almost 2 decades where I got away from it. Like, I was really frustrated. I couldn't talk to you about being an athlete. So when I went through all my surgeries with my hip, and I was handicapped for about 4 years from my first surgery, there was something that it just, I had to reignite this inner warrior, this athlete, because I was losing who I was really quick.
So 20 years, and then having to deal with the surgery, feeling different physically, and then losing the identity that you had of being a football player. That was the lowest of times for you.
It was, and again, we're as humans, we're meaning making machines. So we make meaning out of a lot of stuff. And so
Mm.
the meaning as a young kid, as being a quarterback, I was fortunate. I played quarterback for 13 years. I was always a starter, was very likable. When you go through high school, and this was my journey, on top of being the quarterback and being popular, I was homecoming king every year, except
Okay.
for my freshman year, right? So
Okay.
when you have this persona and you have this, like, I'm the guy, I'm the man,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
when it goes away, and then people want to relive, hey, I remember. No, I don't even want to remember. And so it took me a while to actually get to the point where, like, today I'm 45 years old, I'm still an athlete, but for
Mm-hmm.
about 2 decades I couldn't tell you that I was an athlete. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell you that I broke records. I just couldn't. But I found the joy and I found the love within myself. And so
Mm.
now I'm back, and I've been back, and it's been a beautiful experience, actually.
I like that phrase, meaning making machines. Is That's what we are as human beings. So that it sounds to me like you're saying we have this desire just to always find meaning to everything, which can be good if we can put a good label on it, but it can
Right.
also be really bad, right?
Right. Case in point, I ask this question all the time, especially when I'm working with athletes. Is stress good or bad? Is pressure good or bad? Is anxiety good or bad? And really what it comes down to, do you think it's good or bad?
Mm.
Like, when nerves, I ask that all
Mm-hmm.
the time. In high school, at the high school
Mm-hmm.
level, I would say 90% of the athletes that I ask that question, most of them say that nerves are negative. Well,
Mm-hmm.
why? Nerves are actually good. If you tell
Mm.
yourself good and you can control it with your breath and control your nerves with visualization and self-talk all the way up to the beginning of the game, man, that's beautiful because you can use that energy. And usually that energy kind of dissipates and kind of fades away as soon as you play. But your body's just telling you you're ready to perform. And that's a great thing. But there's a lot, the relationship, people just feel like that nerves are bad. Stress
Mm-hmm.
is bad. There's good
Mm-hmm.
stress, right?
Mm.
And when you think about, here's another example. When you think about the Super Bowl, World Series, NBA Finals, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the be all end all. But people make meaning out of it. Like, oh my gosh, it's a Super Bowl. Okay, well, what's changed about the game? Did the rules
Mm.
change?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's changed.
Right.
It's just the meaning that you put in it, so which affects our emotions and our thoughts.
What a great thought, though, because I naturally think if I'm feeling anxious that's a bad thing. But if I could look at it as this is my body preparing me for something very big, the adrenaline rushes, so that I can be ready for something really great.
Well, when you say the word anxious, it's funny. When anybody has anxiety or they're anxious, they're worrying about something. And so when you realize that, when you feel anxious, okay, when you feel it, you have to ask yourself, okay, what am I worrying about? And then when you're worrying about, when you find out what you're worrying about, most of it is in the future and you have no
Yes.
control of it.
Yes.
So then when you kind of know that, you're like, okay, so then I'm going to focus on the right things within my control. So that's why we talked about, like, living in yesterday and tomorrow. Like, we call that past living and pre-living. If we can, if we don't live in those two realms and we're living in now, that's what we can control. That's
Yeah.
what we want, right?
Sure.
It's easy to do, but it's hard to do at times depending
Sure.
on someone's life, what they're going through.
Hey, just quickly, I want to bounce back to you mentioned this thought of kind of getting out of yourself for the moment for whatever it is that you have to do, something big. I can't remember exactly what the specific topic was, but it was just getting out of yourself, and then you kind of get back to normal again.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that that's part of everyday life, or pretty much everyday life. there are times at work, or there's times, for me as a speaker, where you have to step out on stage and you just kind of have to project and get out of and be bigger than you are feeling at that moment, and then you can kind of return a little later on. But so, are there ways to kind of propel yourself to that moment when you're not feeling it?
For sure. So when we think about, like you said, like you're gonna go out and you're gonna talk, you gotta perform, right? You're performing a role. Anytime you're performing, it's a role, right? So if you're going to perform a role, you have to actually, what's going to help us is confidence, right? And a lot of times people think that confidence is a feeling, and it is, but you have to do certain things to get the feeling of confidence. So that means act into your confidence. When you think about Meryl Streep, who I think is one of the best actors ever, right? Do you know how many roles that she has played in her life? Hundreds. She's had to act into the confidence of that role. So if we own our role, right, and we act into it, then we can feel confident. So then we have to ask the question, so what does it look like to act into confidence? We got to get into our breath. We got to have good body posture. We've got to visualize our performance. And we actually have to have self-talk. We're not going to listen to our thoughts, but we're going to talk to them. And if we can do this in a good progression and make it second nature, make it your best practice, you can own any opportunity where you have to perform if you have those things in alignment.
So when you have the negative thoughts of I'm ugly, or I'm a failure, what is a way to talk to that thought?
Well, there's a few things. So this is really interesting. I think what happens when we start listening to our thoughts and we start listening to the negativity, typically when we do that, generally speaking, it's when we're alone. So when we're in your room or in your office, in your cubicle, I call that the devil's room. I do. Like when you're just sitting there and you're listening, you're putting yourself in the effect of these thoughts. What I'm going to ask you, to your listeners and anyone, to empower themselves, get out of that room. Like literally, if you're really negative in your head, remove yourself and do a few things. Put some music on.
Okay.
For the most part, music is so universal. It will change the way you breathe. If you drop into it, it'll change the flow of your blood. If you're listening to music that inspires you. And for me, like when I'm in the devil's room and my mind is going 100 miles an hour, I put on Journey, Don't Stop Believing. And it makes me feel good,
Sure. Right.
Yeah. And so I think that's one thing. But I think one way that I actually teach is based off breath, because everything starts with breath. But when you get into your breath, ask yourself this: what's important now? Win, W-I-N, I call it the win mindset.
I love that. Yeah.
I think when you can recalibrate and refocus, you know your thoughts, you got some self-awareness going, your thoughts are going 100 miles an hour, you get into your breath, ask yourself what's important now, and if you can act on that, regardless what the result is, but if you can act on it, then to me that's winning. To me that's success, because you're getting back into control.
So you have these great acronyms and these great quotes that I want to over the next 15 minutes or so, go over some of them. By the way, listeners, it's going to be really powerful the next 15 or so minutes. But just to start with, one acronym is BVT, and that's pretty much what we've already talked about, but that's a good acronym. So BVT, tell me about that.
So BVT, basically, I put in, well, to be honest with you, there's another acronym that I know you're going to bring up. It's called MVP. So the MVP was created by my mentor, Grant Parr. And so when I saw this process, MVP, which is meditation, visualization, and powerful self-talk, I was like, that is a very good strategy to actually connect the mind and the body, just doing it on a day-to-day basis. So doing your daily MVPs will allow you to be your own MVP. So when I started to do this and then teach it, I'm like, there's got to be another thing I can actually spin off that can actually help you more in the moment to deal with stuff. So that's how I created the BVT. So like I said, get into the breath, you breathe.
Which
So
is
when
the
you have your
B,
breath, which is
B,
the B,
breath.
and then you visualize what you want to see yourself to do. And if you practice visualization enough times and you have a really good relationship with it, you can literally get that image in your head real quick, right? So you breathe, you see yourself what to do, and then you talk yourself. That's the self-talk. So T means self-talk or talk. And you're talking your way into the direction where you want to go in a positive way. So if you can breathe, see yourself, and then say, let's go. Or you breathe, you see yourself doing great things, and you say, I'm a champion, right? That whole process took about 3 to 5 seconds,
You're
and you're
Sure.
and you're not focusing on anything out of your control. It's all within your control.
Listeners, we are going to again talk more about these, just some of the awesome things that Grant teaches in the next few moments. Just a reminder: this is the 24 Today Inspiring Stories podcast. I am Pastor Tom. You can find me at 24today.org. You can find me if you search 24 Today Facebook encouragement. You can find me there. I've got just a lot of encouraging thoughts, videos that I post daily. But let's talk about Grant Parr. Grant, you can find him at gamefaceperformance.com. That's gamefaceperformance.com. Grant, tell me a little bit about your website and what people will find there.
Yeah, my website, you'll find you'll get a feel of my approaches and my packages and how I work with people. You also find all my podcasts there, so 90%
Oh, yeah.
Mental. And then there's blogs on there. There's also, if you want to buy my book, there's an
Sure.
opportunity to buy my book there. But yeah, and actually, I would say in the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to be a little bit more robust. I'm going to put more videos on there. I'm
Okay.
going to have more partnerships on there. And so I'm really excited to actually release that stuff. So it's going to be kind of a cool like mental performance portal for anyone that's interested in learning more about just mental performance training or about me.
Good. So that's gamefaceperformance.com. And your podcast, if listeners, if you are a sports fan, you will enjoy 90% Mental, the podcast, just because Grant interviews a lot of athletes on there, coaches, and you'll find it interesting. Tell me about that topic or that title, 90% Mental. What's that?
It was funny. It's actually it's a Yogi Berra spinoff. He
Oh, that's
said that a
right.
lot. Yeah. So I got it from him, for sure. But it was really funny. The whole podcast came from uh, it was a it was a school project for my grad program, and
Mm.
it was either doing a thesis or doing a special project. So I was like, well, I don't want to do a thesis, um, and so I'm like, I don't even know what a podcast is. It sounds kind of cool, and so I started doing it, and I started the first 3 episodes as Mind Sync sessions. That was kind of the name, and then I was working with someone that was helping me kind of change my brand and bring more brand awareness.
Right.
And she was like, I don't know if I like Mind Sync. And I was like, well, I like it because I made it up. And
Sure
then
you do.
she's like, so then we just sat there and I go, what about 90% mental? And she's like, that's it. That's
Mm.
it right there. So that's how the name came. And I also, channeled my inner Yogi Berra. So
There you go. There you go. And then again, your book, the next one up, Mindset, How to Prepare for the Unknown. Want to share anything about the book?
yeah, the book, I believe that I wrote it for everyone. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's a hard thing to do sometimes when you're
Sure.
trying to write a book for everyone, but literally it is I think we all perform. We all do. And so whether if you're a house mom or if you're a
Mm-hmm.
CEO, doctor, a football coach,
Mm-hmm.
we have to deal with these things called emotions and thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can actually use them to our advantage or they can get the best of us. So this book actually shares not only my story, but a ton of different stories out there that where people actually, when they got their number called or when they got called unexpectedly, they were mentally prepared and they did the right things. And I'm also sharing in the book some stories where people had that opportunity and failed at it because they weren't doing the right things.
Mm.
So I share a lot of those cool stories in all sports and all workplace situations. So it's a book that's going to talk to coaches, athletes, parents. I call them corporate athletes, so executives, So it's, I think I hit it all, and I feel really good about it. And there's a lot of great strategies, as we were talking about,
Sure,
like DBT and MVP.
sure. Listeners, we're going to talk now for a few more minutes. I promise you, you're going to get something from it. It's going to be good as we head down to the home stretch of this conversation. You say, Grant, that every time there is a crisis, we have to put on a different lens.
Yep. You know, a lot of times when we're experiencing something chaotic or a crisis, a lot of times I've just generally speaking, and speaking from experience, we lose our breath. We get tight emotionally, you know, and then and sometimes we live in that for a while. And we start thinking about all the bad stuff that's happened to us. And so I think if we can actually put on a different lens when we see crisis, when we see an opportunity to deal with adversity, man, I've seen it in my life. I've seen it with so many other performers and athletes that I've worked with. If you allow yourself to get the lesson from the crisis, that is the opportunity. And if you can get the lesson from it, get the feedback, man, things can really relish from there. And I'll tell you, with me, I spent 2 decades in a crisis. That's why I wrote the book. Like, literally, I want to teach everyone out there that in the moment when you deal with something unexpected, you actually have all the power in the world in the moment to make the best decision for yourself and for your mind and body. And it took me 2 decades, and I don't want anybody to go wait that long. So I think that if we can just get excited for adversity, because if you can actually allow yourself to get the lesson and put on a different lens and have a different relationship, you will get something out of that crisis. For people to be successful in life, they have to fail.
Sure.
And below the line of success, guess what's below the line of success? It's a list of failures. So this is a different relationship, a different lens. When we think about failure and success go hand in hand. So let's have a different relationship with it. So I say fail up. Let's fail fast and move on. Let's fail forward. When you think of the acronym for FAIL, it's the first attempt in learning, right? It's a beautiful acronym.
First attempt in learning. Fail.
So let's fail up, because failing to me feels like it goes downwards, right? When you lose, you fail. But you know what? If we're going upwards to succeed, then let's fail up. Let's have a different lens on. Let's put a different lens on and have a different relationship with it.
Now, Grant, you teach, and I quote, "Focus is a choice, confidence is an action, greatness is a decision."
Yes.
Tell me about that.
You know, to be honest with you, I'm going to credit my mentor again, Graham Bedchart, because he shared that with me about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was, to me, it just was like, wow, those 3 things really make sense to me. When you think about focus, because we talked about that again, right? Focus on what? There's so many things to focus on in life. You're at a choice. If you really want to focus, you want to be really, really dialed in, laser focused, you have to choose it. You really have to choose it. And then if in confidence, we talked about that already, right? Confidence, right. You have to act into it. You have to act. So the beautiful thing about that, no matter how chaotic life is or how low you have been feeling, you actually have the power in yourself to create enough energy to go get right back to being confident. But you have to make that choice.
And you have to move. You have to literally, physically, mentally, you have to actually do something. So you don't just get the confidence without doing something, and then all of a sudden, once you have full confidence, then you can move.
Right.
You're saying it's part of the actually doing it that gives you the confidence.
Yeah. I mean, there's science that if you stare 2 minutes every day in the mirror, stare with your posture, shoulders back, head up, and start smiling. Do that for 2 minutes every single day. What will happen is that when you're not confident for whatever reason, you'll know how your body will respond. It's seen it so many times. It is acted. It has actually activated the confidence, and you're literally breathing on how confident you are. So when you actually need to be confident, you've already trained your brain to go, and that's an action. We're acting right into confidence right now.
Grant, as we close, I'd like you to speak directly, if you will, to the listener. And I'm going to start you off with another one of your quotes, and it is this: "You are not your performance. You are not your injury. You are not your most recent setback. We control the controllables.
Yes. It's kind of going back to what I said earlier. It's your sport is what you do. It's not who you are, right? So even if you have an injury, that injury doesn't define who you are. You know what defines who you are is how you respond to it, right? And that's the opportunity. I get excited when I see someone that's injured. Like, man, do you realize the journey you're going to go on? Like, you're going to bounce back. Well, I don't know if I'm going to bounce back. It's hurt. You know what I mean? Like, no, like you have the opportunity to have a different mindset to change it. And let's so focus on what we can control. Because a lot of times, all of our baggage is typically around stuff that's either out of our control or it's in the past.
Right.
These negative belief systems were formed a long time ago, and they
Sure.
serve us for some reason. But I think when we get into what's important now, that mindset, we can actually get back into control and focus on the things we can control.
So you are not your performance, you are not your job, you are not your role necessarily that you have or people put on you. You're not your injury, you're not your most recent setback. Control the controllable. So who would you say you are if you're not? I mean, is there a general way to say that? Who
Yeah.
would you say you are if you're not these other things?
Yes, and I love it that you brought it up because I work with people on this all the time. So who am I outside of being a mental performance coach? Because that's my role, right? So I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a musician, I'm an avid book reader, I'm a dog owner, love dogs, right? That's who I am. So when I actually get done with performing and I let that go, that persona, I go back to who I am. And it's beautiful because I'll tell you what, if I have a bad day, guess what? Looking into the eyes of my dog changes everything because I'm getting back to who I am. When I start playing piano, playing guitar, like I just start to forget about that and I'm going back to who I am. Now, if I'm thriving, if my performance is awesome and I'm just rocking it, guess what? When I go back to who I am, my dogs, being a husband, all that, I thrive even more. So
Wow,
that's why it's really important to find out who are you
that's great.
outside of what you do.
Great. So find 4 or 5 things or more of who you are, regardless of what it is,
Yep.
of who you are, and then try to tap into that each day for some period of time. It doesn't have to be a real long time, but at least tap into it, because the longer we go without tapping into that, the more we become everything else than who we are, and life becomes and seems unlivable.
And we reduce stress, right? So
Yeah.
if we have a bad performance in whatever we're doing, if we can get back to who we are and we connect to really what resonates with us, gives us like high frequency, good energy, we tend to like kind of let go of that bad performance, let go of all the negative emotion that gets created. So that's why it's really, really good about identity. Like there's some athletes, there's some performers that everything they do is wrapped up into their performance. That's why I want to make sure that the performance is not who you are. It's just something you do. So if we can actually go back to who we are, it just allows us to manage stress, manages to get us back into control, getting back into the now. I always say this, intention equals mindset. If you want to have a mindset for the day, set your intention. Set your intention for work, relationship, whatever it is, set your intention and then breathe on it. Like literally, what does it look like and what does it feel like? Connect with it for about 15 seconds. And then throughout the day, like lunchtime, 1 o'clock, revisit your intention. Are you being intentional? And then at the end of the day, reflect on it real quick. If you're doing that every day, you're being purposeful, right? You're being intentional. And I think another thing you can do is just practice gratitude in the morning before you go to
Yes.
work, right? Write 3 or 4 things down and then
Sure.
breathe on it. So if you're intentional and you're grateful, man, that's a good start.
Just breathe. I love it. But listeners, you'll find out a lot more in depth about it with Grant's book. The next one up, Mindset, How to Prepare for the Unknown. You can find that on Grant's website, which is gamefaceperformance.com, or you can also find it on Amazon. You can listen to his podcast, 90% Mental. And once again, Grant, been fascinating. Thank you for the time you spent on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to share my energy. I appreciate it.
Listeners, remember, there is still time left in this 24-hour period to live life today.